This 29 legislations which are now being codified into 4 major laws, they are now having uniformity in definitions. For example, we take the definition of wages. Today, the definition of wages in Industrial Disputes Act is different from the definition of wages in Gratuity Act. The definition of wage is different in Payment of Bonus Act, Factories Act, and then you look at any other act, ESI Act. So maybe I've been able to work in the HR domain for 38 years because of the confusion, because I am an expert. Any layman cannot understand what is a wage in Payment of Gratuity Act when he talks about Payment of Bonus Act. So I am an expert. I'll tell him, you don't know, this is the definition. So don't apply the same thing. So now that has gone away. They brought in uniform definition of all aspects under this new labor code, which would reduce the complexity. This is certainly a welcome move. It has got its own advantages and disadvantages, which we will talk about in the next few minutes. Another thing which is welcome in this new labor code, they've given leverage for technology. Now I can maintain all the records online. I can file all reports online. So technology can be put to use enormously. I don't have to maintain those registers, records, preserve them for years together, show them when some inspector comes, or produce them before a judicial authority. That is now a thing of the past once this legislation is implemented. The next one I would like to touch upon is the definition of contractor and contract labor. As HR professionals, you all know this definition is not existing in the current enactments, including the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act. Now this new law is defining who is a contractor, and they are also fastening the liability on the contractor. Earlier, the contractor used to enjoy his status because everything is made the responsibility of the principal employer. Now the contractor in certain circumstances is being held responsible for implementation or compliance related to the workman employed by him. And the definition of contract labor also is very nicely articulated in this new law. Say, for example, we had some situations when we were doing a project in my previous company, we brought in L&T to do the project. L&T was 20 times larger than the company in which I am working. But as per the existing laws, L&T is my contractor and I am the principal employer, and L&T has to distribute the salaries of their employees before a representative from my company, and I need to supervise L&T. So this is a very peculiar situation. I'll give you another situation. There was one power company which was set up near Hyderabad. The promoter is a very small time fellow who manufactures this Bambino vermicelli. He decided to get into setting up a power plant. So he tied up with Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce has got these engines which generate power. So they have deployed some expats to build, operate, and transfer. So all these expats have become the contract labor of Bambino vermicelli. That's a very peculiar situation. So the current law is correcting that. Now it says any person who is working with a contractor, if he is receiving his salary, statutory benefits, annual increments from the contractor, he is deemed to be the employee of the contractor. He is not a contractor labor. So for example, Wipro deploys people on the Microsoft Office premises. Earlier, if you go by the strict definition, the Wipro employees are contract labor of Microsoft. Now that is being taken care of. Having talked about all these things, which are certainly welcome on the part of the organizations, there are certain challenges. I would like to also talk about these challenges, or you may even say concerns, or you can say difficulties envisaged in terms of implementation. What are they? Today, if a workman who is dismissed from service or a trade union who is espousing an industrial dispute, if they'll have to approach a labor court or a tribunal, that matter has to be referred by the government after the failure of the conciliation proceedings. Now, what they are doing through this new law is any aggrieved workman or the trade union, when the conciliation proceedings are taking place, they can directly go and approach the industrial tribunal. That means there would be more litigation going for adjudication. There is going to be frivolous litigation. And I don't know whether our courts in India are equipped to handle this kind of a voluminous matters which come before them. As it is today, the labor court and industrial tribunal takes anywhere from 5 years to 7 years to dispose of the cases. And there are huge number of cases pending before these courts. This is going to be a huge burden on the labor court, or now labor court is no longer there, the industrial tribunal. And we'll have to wait and see how this works out. And maybe it would also increase the work for the HR professionals. The major one I would like to now talk about is the definition of wages. Today, as I've told you, we have different definitions for wages. The definition of wages under the Provident Fund Act is basic plus. Until recently, the Vivekananda Vidya Mandir case, we were only paying Provident Fund on basic plus DA. And basic plus DA was anything between 30 and 40%. Gratuity we were paying on basic plus DA. Of course, managers don't get DA, it's just the basic. But now what this law says is, if the total remuneration is 100 rupees, the basic plus DA and retaining allowance should be at least 50%. If it is not 50%, you add some allowances for the purpose of reckoning the basic DA retaining allowance. Retaining allowance, of course, is applicable to seasonal establishments. It's not a generic thing. So you may ask me, what are the implications here? The major implication comes from gratuity. Today, let's say the salary of an employee is 1 lakh of rupees and his basic is 30,000 rupees. This company, let's say, is 40-year-old and this employee is working in the company for 20 years. His basic of 30,000 rupees from the date of the implementation of this legislation should be construed as 50,000 rupees. And his gratuity has to be computed on 50,000 rupees for the previous service. So what is going to be your previous service liability for huge organizations? Even looking at the public sector organizations like ONGC, HPCL, NTPC, forget about the private organizations like TCS, or you talk about Reliance Industries or the Tata Group. My organization, where we have 2,500 employees, when we calculated the past service liability, it is coming to 32 crores of rupees. Forget about the future liability. And once I account that, what kind of a hit it will take on my balance sheet and profit and loss account? Think about organizations which are employing thousands of employees, and Gratuity Act applies to everybody irrespective of the threshold of salary limit. Of course, some companies limit the gratuity to 20 lakhs of rupees. Many organizations don't do. They pay the full gratuity. This is going to be a major financial burden on the organizations, which we need to be alive to. So companies are already restructuring their salaries to see how do they handle this kind of a major change, which is going to be facing them within a short period of time. The same with Provident Fund. Today, if my basic pay is 30% of my total remuneration, you're paying 12% on 30%. From tomorrow, you will have to pay 12% on 50,000 rupees. Of course, there is a cap of 15,000 rupees for payment of Provident Fund, but many organizations pay on the full basic pay. How do you handle these things? This is another major, I would say, cost which would be facing the organizations when the new law comes into the force. And we also need to look at the impact of this change in the definition of wages, how it will impact the payment of bonus. The new law is actually saying the principal employer is liable to ensure payment of bonus to the contract labor. There is additional cost in terms of that. There is another provision which is going to come into play, which is minimum wages if minimum wages are stipulated for any category of employment, those employees are also to be paid overtime wages at twice the normal rate of wages. Some minimum wages notifications today have notified minimum wages to managerial employees also. Tomorrow, do I face the predicament of paying overtime wages for any work beyond 48 hours in a week to some of the managerial employees for whom minimum wages were prescribed under the government notifications? This is something which I need to be alive to. Then employee state insurance scheme. Under that, the entire remuneration is considered as wage today for the purpose of determining the applicability of ESI scheme. When it becomes 50%, more employees will come within the ambit of ESI. So that means until now, 21,000 rupees is the threshold. Tomorrow, what happens? Their basic is 10,500 rupees. So even a person who is drawing 10,500 rupees will come within the ambit of ESI scheme. Not that many employees would like to be part of ESI scheme for the kind of an image it is having today. Then there is another provision where it says any organization employing interstate migrant workmen who are drawing a wage of less than 80,000 rupees, their journey allowance once in a year to travel between their hometown and the place of work should be borne by the management. So these are some of the additional financial burdens which the companies would be staring upon once the new law comes into force. So my request to all my fellow HR professionals and the business leaders is to be alive to the situation, come out with plans even before the law is implemented so that you're not taken by surprise. These are on the anvil. Some changes may happen, but then most of the changes are going to be pushed through. One more concern in terms of the bonus provisions in the new law, I would like to share with you. Today, the government of India has stipulated that payment of bonus, all employees who are drawing a salary of 21,000 rupees or less are eligible for payment of bonus at the rate of 8.33 or 10-20% depending on the available surplus, allocable surplus. That calculations are there. We will not get into that. There's no change in the way we calculate the available surplus. But then what they did today was they're giving that authority to the state governments to lay down the eligibility criteria and threshold for making the payment of bonus, because labor laws are concurrent subjects. Both the center can make laws, the states can make laws. Now imagine an organization like ours, where we are present in 5 states. The Maharashtra state government will declare that all employees drawing 25,000 rupees salary will get a bonus calculated on 10,000 rupees. Gujarat government will say all employees drawing salary of 50,000 rupees will get a bonus calculated on 20,000 rupees. That means for the employees who are working in Gujarat in the same company, I need to calculate a different bonus. For the employees working in Maharashtra, I'll have to calculate a different rate of bonus. This is going to create a heartburn among the employees, and also the organizations have to find ways to mitigate this challenge. Today, it's not a challenge. But then when this authority is extended to the state governments, this certainly is going to be a challenge. So this is something which we need to take care of and understand how are we going to handle this kind of a situation. One of the concerns which I would like to explain here is coming from the Code of Wages. Today, the Payment of Wages Act is applicable to employees who are drawing a monthly salary of 24,000 rupees. That means a manager or a CEO who is drawing a monthly salary of few lakhs of rupees, the provisions of Payment of Wages Act doesn't apply to them. What is happening now? They said the provisions of payment of wages will apply to everybody, because they brought in a definition of employee, they brought in a definition of worker. That means a professional CEO in an organization can also take recourse under the payment of wages provisions in the new Code on Wages. You may ask me, how is it going to impact us? Let's say there is a manager. who resigned or who's been asked to go. He raises a dispute in terms of the amounts which he is supposed to receive from the organization. The company takes a tough stand. They say, you are not eligible for this, we are not going to pay you. What is the remedy under the new law for him? He can directly go and file a criminal complaint against the managing director of the company for violation of the provisions of this code. That's okay for the managers. Can the unions not misuse this provision? Tomorrow, I am having some kind of a conflict with the trade union. The trade union would like to exert pressure on me. They will find a frivolous issue under payment of wages or minimum wages. They will directly approach a criminal court and file a criminal complaint against the organization. The organization will be prosecuted. This is a draconian provision under the new code on wages, and this can be misused. Certainly, this is something the government intended to provide protection to the employees, but at the same time, we need to look at the other side of the coin. This can get misused. This is something which we need to understand. As I've told you, why trade unions are unhappy regarding this extending the threshold from 100 workers to 300 workers for seeking permission for layoff, retrenchment, or closure, the fixed term employment provision, the right to strike being taken away. These are all these sore points for the trade unions on which they are objecting and making a big hue and cry and protesting before the government authorities. In conclusion, let's look at some other key provisions which are going to be implemented under this new codes. So far, minimum wages are being declared by each state government for different scheduled employments. Whichever scheduled employments the minimum wages are declared by a state government, those employments only will have minimum wages. And minimum wages declaration is done in a competitive way by one state government when compared to the other state government. If you look at the minimum wages declared by the government of Delhi, compare it with the government of Assam, there is a substantial difference between the minimum wages between these two states for the same set of employees. Why? Because an underdeveloped state like Assam would like to offer lesser minimum wages so that more and more organizations would come and set shop in their state. Now what they are doing, the national floor level minimum wage is going to be declared by the central government for each region, each employment. No scheduled employment, all employments, the government will declare national floor level minimum wage. What is the implication of this national floor level minimum wage? The state governments are prohibited to fix minimum wages below the national floor level minimum wage. I can't compete with another state government in declaring a lesser minimum wage to attract industry to my state. So this would certainly bring in parity on minimum wages. Certainly it's a beneficial piece of legislation for the employees, but then the state governments will be actually put to some kind of a discomfort in this. Extending social security benefits to the gig, platform, and unorganized employees. Because this is something which is very new. It's the sunrise industry. These Zomatos, Ubers, Olas, Swiggies, Amazons of this world, they have sprung up in the last few years. And you have huge number of people who are working with these organizations, who are called platform workers. Of course, another concern as far as platform workers who are these drivers of Ola, Uber cabs, where they use the platform of these companies and then they do business with them or they actually work for them, whatever you say. What happened was the courts in France, UK, and last week in Holland have come out with some breakthrough judgments holding these platform workers as the employees of these organizations, especially Uber is the respondent in these cases. They said that all benefits applicable to the employees are to be made applicable to these platform workers, the drivers of these Uber cars. So we have not gone there so far. We'll have to wait and see, because day before yesterday, employees of Zomato, Uber, Ola, they've approached the court seeking similar kind of relief from the courts in India. So we'll have to keep our fingers crossed what the court will decide tomorrow. But meanwhile, these changes which the government of India is trying to bring in through the labor code is to extend social security benefits to these. Gig means platform are those people who are outside the traditional form of employment, master-servant relationship, as you call it in the strict sense of the term, or the unorganized sector who are not covered under the Employees Provident Fund, ESI, or any other enactments. They are going to create a social security fund to provide social security benefits to them. How are the contributions to this social security fund going to come from? They will comprise of contributions from these companies who are hiring these gig platform and unorganized workers. 1 to 2% of their turnover should be their contribution, or 5% of their wage bill of these workers, whichever is less, is to be contributed to this social security fund set up by the government. And the government also will fund this social security benefits. But then one question arose: what is meant by turnover? These Uber, Ola, Zomato, and Swiggy approached the central government to seek clarification on how do you define turnover? Is the turnover coming only from this aggregator business or our whole turnover? But then they are still waiting for a clarification from the government, because we are into several businesses where we may not hire these gig and platform workers. Do you take the entire turnover, or you only confine the turnover to the areas we are hiring these kind of gig or platform workers? So that's something which we need to wait and see in terms of the clarifications to be provided by the government. Last but not the least, I would like to touch upon the penalties which are envisaged under the codes for non-compliance. They have been made very stringent. Penalties for non-compliance runs into few lakhs of rupees, and prosecution and imprisonment maybe up to 6 months. But then there is one provision where the first time offense can be compounded by the government authorities. But then a repeat of the same offense can actually result in a stiff penalty. So this is something which we need to be mindful of. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
For all
Thank you for this opportunity. I am honored.